The morning sun cast long shadows across the forward operating base as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos cleaned her rifle for the third time that day. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each motion automatic after 12 years in the military. Around her, the other soldiers prepared for what intelligence reports called a routine patrol through the mountainous region near the Pakistani border. "Hey, Angel," called out Corporal Thompson from across the weapons tent. "You sure that scope is clean enough? Wouldn't want you missing any targets today." Maria looked up from her work, her dark eyes steady. The nickname Angel had followed her through 2 deployments, earned not from any heavenly qualities, but because her call sign was Death Angel, a name that had started as a joke among her unit. When she first arrived at the base 18 months ago, the other soldiers had laughed at the idea of a female sniper being called anything related to death. They saw her small frame, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, and assumed the brass had made some kind of mistake. "My scope is always clean, Thompson," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "Maybe you should worry more about keeping your rifle from jamming again." The laughter that followed was friendly enough, but Maria could hear the undertone. Even after proving herself repeatedly, some of the men still saw her as the outsider, the woman who had somehow talked her way into a sniper position. They respected her shooting skills. They had to, after she consistently outscored them at the range. But respect and acceptance were different things. Lieutenant Colonel Davis entered the tent, his weathered face serious. At 52, he had seen enough combat to know when something felt wrong, and today had that feeling written all over it. Intelligence suggested increased insurgent activity in the area they were scheduled to patrol, but higher command insisted the mission proceed as planned. "Listen up," Davis announced, his voice cutting through the morning chatter. "We're moving out in 30 minutes. This is a standard patrol through sectors 7 and 8. Intelligence reports some possible insurgent movement, but nothing concrete. Stay alert, follow protocols, and we'll be back for Christmas Eve dinner." Maria finished assembling her rifle and slung it across her shoulder. The weapon was a customized M24 sniper weapon system, modified to her exact specifications. She had spent months adjusting every component until it felt like an extension of her body. The other snipers in the unit preferred different setups, but Maria had learned early in her career that success came from knowing your equipment better than you knew yourself. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez approached her as she gathered her gear. At 38, he was one of the older enlisted men in the unit and had served with distinction in Iraq before this deployment. Unlike some of the others, Rodriguez had never questioned Maria's abilities, but he also rarely went out of his way to include her in the informal networks that bound the unit together. "Santos, you'll be taking overwatch position on Hill 247 during the patrol," he said, consulting his tablet. "Standard procedure: maintain visual contact with the patrol and report any suspicious activity." "Copy that, Sergeant," Maria replied. She had performed overwatch duties dozens of times, always professionally, always effectively. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being given the assignment because it kept her separate from the main patrol, watching from a distance rather than moving with the team. As the unit prepared to move out, Maria checked her equipment one final time. Her pack contained everything she needed for a day-long mission: extra ammunition, water, medical supplies, communication equipment, and the specialized gear that made long-range shooting possible. She had learned to carry more than the recommended load because being prepared often meant the difference between mission success and disaster. The patrol consisted of 12 soldiers divided into 3 teams. Alpha Team would take point, moving through the valley floor and checking known insurgent hiding spots. Bravo Team would provide flanking support, staying roughly parallel to Alpha but maintaining separation for tactical advantage. Charlie Team, which included the medic and communication specialist, would remain in reserve, ready to respond to whatever Alpha and Bravo might encounter. Maria would be alone on Hill 247, providing overwatch for all 3 teams from an elevated position that offered clear sight lines across the entire patrol route. It was a critical position that required absolute focus and the ability to make split-second decisions that could save lives. Yet as she listened to the pre-mission briefing, she could see some of the soldiers exchanging glances when her assignment was announced. The walk to Hill 247 took 45 minutes through terrain that shifted from rocky desert floor to steep mountainous slopes, covered with scrub brush and loose stone. Maria moved carefully, aware that insurgents had been known to booby-trap approaches to key tactical positions. Her training had taught her to read the landscape like a book, looking for signs of human passage, disturbed earth, or anything that seemed out of place in the natural environment. Reaching her position, Maria immediately began the methodical process of setting up her hide. She cleared a small area behind a cluster of rocks, arranged her equipment for quick access, and established multiple firing positions that would allow her to engage targets across different sectors of the patrol route. The work was physical and demanding, but it was also meditative in its precision. Through her scope, Maria could see the patrol beginning their movement through the valley below. Alpha Team moved in a standard formation, with point man, rifleman, and automatic weapons positioned to provide mutual support. Bravo Team maintained their parallel course, staying far enough away to avoid being caught in the same ambush, but close enough to provide supporting fire if needed. The radio crackled with routine communications as the teams reported their positions and observations. Maria monitored the traffic while scanning her assigned sectors, looking for any sign of insurgent activity. The morning air was clear, providing excellent visibility across the entire valley, and her elevated position offered commanding views of potential ambush sites. "Angel, this is Alpha 1," came Lieutenant Harrison's voice over the radio. "We're approaching Checkpoint Bravo. Any movement in your sector?" "Alpha 1, this is Angel," Maria responded. "Negative movement. All sectors clear from my position." The patrol continued its methodical advance through the valley, checking predetermined waypoints and investigating areas where intelligence suggested insurgent activity. So far, everything appeared normal. Too normal, Maria thought as she continued her surveillance. Her experience had taught her that insurgents rarely left an area completely empty unless they were planning something. Through her scope, she watched Alpha Team approach a narrow section of the valley where the walls rose steeply on both sides. It was a natural choke point, the kind of terrain that made experienced soldiers nervous because it offered excellent concealment for attackers while limiting escape routes for anyone caught in the open. "Alpha 1, be advised you're approaching terrain that favors ambush," Maria transmitted. "Recommend increased caution and consider alternate route." "Copy that, Angel," Harrison replied. "We're aware of the terrain. Intelligence reports this area clear, but we'll stay alert." Maria adjusted her position slightly, focusing her attention on the ridgeline above the choke point. If insurgents were planning an ambush, that elevated terrain would provide ideal firing positions while offering multiple escape routes. She methodically scanned each potential hiding spot, looking for any sign of human presence. The sun climbed higher in the sky as the patrol continued its mission. Radio traffic remained routine, with teams reporting their positions and observations according to standard procedures. Yet Maria felt a growing sense of unease that she couldn't quite identify. Something about the morning felt wrong, though she couldn't point to any specific indication of danger. Her radio earpiece crackled with a transmission from base camp. "Angel, this is base. Intelligence update indicates possible insurgent movement in your area of operations. Maintain heightened awareness and report any suspicious activity immediately." "Base, this is Angel," Maria responded. "Copy intelligence update. No suspicious activity observed from current position." The warning confirmed her instincts that something was developing. Intelligence reports rarely came through during active patrols unless analysts had identified credible threats. Maria intensified her surveillance, paying particular attention to areas that offered concealment and good firing positions. 40 minutes into the patrol, Alpha Team reached the narrowest part of the choke point. Through her scope, Maria could see the soldiers moving carefully, weapons ready, eyes scanning the ridgeline above them. They were following proper procedures, but the terrain itself was dangerous regardless of how professionally they approached it. "Angel, this is Bravo 2, came a new voice over the radio. "We're observing your Alpha Team from the eastern slope. Everything looks good from our position." "Copy, Bravo 2, Maria acknowledged. Having multiple observation points was reassuring. though she noticed that Bravo team's position didn't offer the same commanding view of the ridgeline that concerned her most. As Alpha team moved through the choke point, Maria caught a brief flash of reflected light from the ridge above them. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but her trained eye recognized it immediately. Sunlight reflecting off glass or metal, the kind of brief glint that came from optical equipment or weapons. Her heart rate increased as she focused her scope on the area where she had seen the reflection. For several long seconds, she saw nothing unusual. Then, barely visible among the rocks and scrub vegetation, she detected the outline of what appeared to be a human figure in a well-concealed position. Maria keyed her radio immediately. Alpha 1, this is Angel. Possible hostile position on ridgeline. Grid reference 41 SMB 12345 67890. Recommend immediate cover and assess threat level. Angel, this is Alpha 1, Harrison responded. We don't see anything from our position. Can you confirm hostile activity? Through her scope, Maria could see the figure more clearly now. It was definitely a person in camouflage, positioned behind natural cover with what appeared to be a rifle. The insurgent was focused on Alpha Team's position in the valley below, apparently unaware that he was being observed from Hill 247. Alpha 1, confirmed hostile with weapon, approximately 300 meters above your position. Maria transmitted urgently. Recommend immediate movement to cover and prepare for possible ambush. The response came not from Harrison but from Colonel Davis back at base. Angel, this is base actual. Intelligence reports no confirmed insurgent activity in that area. Are you certain of hostile identification? Maria felt a moment of doubt as she considered the question. Through her scope, she could clearly see an armed figure in a concealed position overlooking the patrol route. Every aspect of the person's positioning and equipment suggested hostile intent. Yet intelligence reports indicated the area was clear, and no one else had reported seeing anything suspicious. Base actual, this is Angel, she replied. I have positive identification of armed individual in concealed position overlooking Alpha Team. Individual's positioning and behavior consistent with hostile intent. The radio remained silent for several seconds before Davis responded. Angel, maintain observation and report any changes. Alpha Team, continue mission but increase alertness level. Through her scope, Maria watched as the insurgent shifted position slightly, bringing his weapon to bear on Alpha Team's position. The movement confirmed her assessment. This was definitely a hostile preparing to engage friendly forces. Yet her warnings had been acknowledged but not acted upon with the urgency the situation demanded. Alpha Team continued their advance through the choke point, following orders but clearly remaining alert to possible threats. Maria kept her scope trained on the insurgent position, ready to engage if the hostile made any aggressive movement. Her finger rested near her rifle's trigger, muscle memory from countless hours of training taking over. The insurgent appeared to be waiting for Alpha Team to reach a specific position before initiating contact. This suggested coordination with other hostile forces, a planned ambush rather than an opportunistic attack. Maria scanned adjacent areas of the ridgeline, looking for additional threats that might be part of a larger operation. Her systematic search revealed two more concealed positions, each occupied by armed figures positioned to create interlocking fields of fire over the patrol route. This was definitely a coordinated ambush, planned and positioned to inflict maximum casualties on any patrol moving through the choke point. Base actual, this is Angel, Maria transmitted urgently. Confirmed multiple hostile positions. Grid references 41 SMB 12345 67890, 12350, 67895, and 12340, 67885. This appears to be coordinated ambush preparation. Recommend immediate withdrawal of Alpha Team to covered positions. The response came quickly this time. Angel, this is base actual. Other observation posts report no hostile activity. Are you certain of your assessment? Maria felt frustration building as she maintained her surveillance of the clearly visible insurgent positions. Through her scope, she could see the hostiles making final preparations, adjusting their weapons, and positioning themselves for optimal fields of fire. Alpha Team remained exposed in the valley below, following their assigned route directly into what would shortly become a killing zone. Base Actual, Angel confirms multiple hostile positions preparing to engage Alpha Team. She responded firmly. Recommend immediate action to protect our forces. As she spoke, Maria saw the first insurgent raise his weapon to firing position, clearly preparing to open fire on Alpha Team. The moment for warnings and confirmations had passed. If she didn't act immediately, soldiers would die in the ambush that was about to begin. Her training took over as she settled into her firing position, adjusted for range and wind conditions, and placed her crosshairs on the first insurgent. The shot would alert everyone to the presence of hostiles, but it would also save the lives of the soldiers moving through the valley below. Maria controlled her breathing as she had been taught, letting her heart rate settle into the calm rhythm that preceded accurate long-range shooting. Through her scope, she could see the insurgent's finger moving toward his trigger, seconds away from initiating the ambush that would endanger her fellow soldiers. The weight of the decision pressed down on her as she realized that taking this shot would prove her warnings correct, but it would also mean revealing her position and potentially drawing fire from the other insurgent positions. Yet the alternative, allowing the ambush to proceed, was unacceptable to everything she believed about protecting her fellow soldiers. Her finger tightened on the trigger as she made the final calculations for the shot. Range, wind speed, target movement, bullet drop. All the variables aligned in her mind as she prepared to engage the first hostile. In seconds, she would either save Alpha Team from a devastating ambush or confirm that her assessment of the situation had been correct all along. The radio crackled once more with routine communications as Alpha Team continued their advance, unaware that their survival now depended on the split-second decision of the sniper they had nicknamed Angel, the woman whose warnings they had questioned and whose abilities some still doubted. Maria's finger completed its smooth trigger pull, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar authority. The 7.62 millimeters round traveled 847 meters in just over 1 second, finding its target with the precision that had earned her expert marksman ratings throughout her military career. Through her scope, she saw the first insurgent collapse immediately, his weapon tumbling down the rocky slope. The sound of her shot echoed across the valley, instantly alerting everyone within miles that contact had been initiated. Before the echo faded, Maria was already transitioning to her second target, muscle memory taking over as she worked the bolt action and acquired the next insurgent position. Contact! Contact! Sniper fire from the ridgeline. Lieutenant Harrison's voice exploded over the radio as Alpha Team scrambled for cover among the rocks scattered across the valley floor. The soldiers moved with trained efficiency, each man knowing his role in reacting to ambush situations. Maria's second shot followed 8 seconds after the first, taking down the insurgent in the middle position before he could bring his weapon to bear on Alpha Team's new defensive positions. The remaining hostile immediately began scanning the surrounding terrain, searching for the source of the sniper fire that had eliminated his comrades. Angel, this is Alpha 1. Harrison transmitted urgently. What's your status? Are you taking fire? Alpha 1. This is Angel. Maria replied calmly while tracking the third insurgent through her scope. 2 hostiles down, 1 remaining. I have visual on final target, but he's moved to cover. Be advised there may be additional hostiles in the area. The third insurgent had indeed moved behind a large boulder, making a clean shot impossible from Maria's current position. Through her scope, she could see portions of his clothing and equipment, but not enough of his body to guarantee a killing shot. She would have to wait for him to expose himself or change her own position to gain a better angle. Base Actual, this is Alpha 1, Harrison reported. Angel has engaged multiple hostiles on the ridgeline, requesting immediate support and extraction guidance. Colonel Davis's voice came back immediately, the skepticism from earlier conversations completely absent. Alpha 1, this is base. QRF is spinning up now. Maintain defensive positions and provide updates on hostile activity. Maria continued her surveillance of the remaining insurgents' position while scanning adjacent areas for additional threats. The quick reaction force would take at least 20 minutes to reach their location, during which time Alpha Team remained vulnerable to further attack. Her elevated position on Hill 247 made her the primary defense against any additional insurgents who might approach the area. Through her earpiece, she could hear increased radio traffic as base camp responded to the contact report. Artillery units were calculating firing solutions for the ridgeline positions. Medical evacuation helicopters were being prepared for potential casualties, and intelligence analysts were frantically reviewing all available information about insurgent activity in the area. Angel, this is Bravo 2. Came a transmission from the Eastern Observation Post. We're moving to support Alpha Team's position. Do you have visual on any additional hostiles approaching from the north? Maria immediately shifted her scope toward the northern approaches, scanning methodically for any signs of movement. Bravo 2, this is Angel. Northern approaches appear clear from my position, but recommend extreme caution. The insurgents had this area well scouted for ambush positions. As she spoke, Maria caught movement in her peripheral vision. The remaining insurgent had shifted position behind his cover, apparently trying to work his way toward a better firing position that would allow him to engage Alpha Team. She tracked his movement carefully, waiting for him to expose enough of his body for a clear shot. The insurgent made his mistake when he raised his head to observe Alpha Team's defensive positions. Maria's crosshairs settled on the small portion of his head visible above the boulder, and she squeezed the trigger with the same smooth precision that had characterized her first two shots. The third insurgent dropped immediately, eliminating the immediate threat to Alpha Team's position. Maria worked her rifle's bolt action and scanned the area once more, looking for any additional hostiles who might have been part of the ambush force. Alpha 1, this is Angel. Third hostile down. No additional movement observed from current position, she reported. Outstanding shooting, Angel, Harrison replied, genuine appreciation clear in his voice. That was textbook Overwatch support. The compliment meant more to Maria than Harrison probably realized. After months of subtle questions about her capabilities and assignments that seemed designed to keep her separate from the main action, having her skills acknowledged by the team leader felt like a significant step forward. Maria maintained her surveillance as Alpha Team began moving toward more defensible positions closer to Bravo Team's location. The soldiers moved tactically, using available cover and maintaining spacing that would minimize casualties if they encountered additional hostiles. Their movements showed the discipline and training that had kept them alive through multiple deployments. Angel, this is Base Actual, Colonel Davis transmitted. Intelligence is now confirming multiple insurgent groups active in your area of operations. How's your ammunition and position security? Maria quickly inventoried her supplies. She had fired 3 rounds from her primary rifle and had 17 rounds remaining in her current magazine, plus 4 additional magazines in her pack. Her position on Hill 247 remained secure, with good observation of the entire valley and multiple covered routes for withdrawal if necessary. Base Actual, this is Angel. Ammunition status green. Position remains secure with good observation. I can continue Overwatch mission for the patrol's duration. Copy that, Angel. QRF is 15 minutes out. Maintain Overwatch and report any additional hostile activity. As Maria settled back into her surveillance routine, she reflected on how quickly the situation had developed. Less than 10 minutes ago, her warnings about hostile positions had been questioned by higher command. Now those same positions had been confirmed through direct engagement, and her accurate shooting had prevented what could have been a devastating ambush of Alpha Team. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from Bravo Team. Angel, this is Bravo Actual. We're in position to provide support for Alpha Team. From our angle, can you see any approaches that insurgents might use to flank our combined position? Maria immediately began scanning the terrain features that could provide concealed approaches to the team's defensive positions. Her elevated observation point allowed her to see routes that would be invisible to soldiers positioned on the valley floor. Bravo Actual, this is Angel. I see 2 possible flanking routes. First is a creek bed running east to west approximately 400 meters north of your position. Second is a series of ridgeline paths that would allow movement from the western high ground. Recommend security elements for both approaches. Copy that, Angel. We'll establish observation on both routes. The coordination between units was working smoothly now, with each element contributing to the overall security of the patrol. Maria's warnings were being taken seriously, and her tactical observations were being integrated into the team's defensive planning. It was the kind of professional cooperation she had hoped to achieve throughout her deployment. Through her scope, Maria continued systematic observation of the surrounding terrain. The insurgents had chosen their ambush site well. The valley offered limited cover for defending forces while providing multiple concealed approaches for attackers. Only her elevated position on Hill 247 offered the commanding view necessary to detect threats before they could close to effective range. A new voice appeared on the radio net. "All stations, this is Reaper 2-1. We're 5 minutes out with close air support capabilities. Angel, can you provide target marking for any suspected hostile positions?" Maria felt a surge of confidence hearing the close air support aircraft checking in. Having aerial firepower available would dramatically increase their ability to respond to any additional insurgent activity in the area. "Reaper 2-1, this is Angel. I have 3 confirmed hostile positions on the ridgeline, grid references transmitted earlier. No additional movement observed at this time, but recommend surveillance of northern and western approaches for possible insurgent reinforcement." "Copy that, Angel. We're establishing orbit overhead, and we'll maintain surveillance of approaches you've identified." The arrival of air support changed the tactical situation significantly. Instead of waiting defensively for the quick reaction force to arrive, they now had the capability to actively hunt any additional insurgents who might be moving toward their position. Maria's role shifted from purely defensive overwatch to target identification for offensive operations. "Angel, this is Alpha 1, Harrison transmitted. We're going to advance to those insurgent positions to conduct battle damage assessment and search for intelligence. Can you provide overwatch during our movement?" "Alpha 1, this is Angel. I have clear observation of your route to the insurgent positions. Recommend approach from the eastern side, where I can maintain visual contact throughout your movement." Alpha Team began their careful advance toward the ridgeline where the insurgents had been positioned. Maria tracked their movement through her scope, simultaneously scanning for any threats that might develop during their vulnerable approach phase. The soldiers moved professionally, using terrain features for concealment while maintaining communication with both Maria and the orbiting aircraft. As Alpha Team reached the first insurgent position, Lieutenant Harrison's voice came over the radio with excitement. "Angel, this is Alpha 1. Your shooting was dead-on accurate. All 3 hostiles are down, and we're recovering weapons and potential intelligence materials." The confirmation of her shooting accuracy was professionally satisfying, but Maria remained focused on her surveillance mission. While Alpha Team was occupied with their battle damage assessment, she needed to maintain security for the entire area of operations. "Alpha 1, this is Angel. Copy your assessment. Be advised on continuing surveillance of surrounding areas while you conduct your operations." The search of the insurgent positions yielded significant intelligence about planned attacks on coalition forces throughout the region. Maps, communication equipment, and documents found with the insurgents indicated this had been part of a larger coordinated offensive plan for the Christmas holiday period. "Base actual, this is Alpha 1, Harrison reported. Intelligence recovery confirms this was advance element of larger insurgent operation. Materials indicate planned attacks on multiple coalition positions over next 48 hours. Colonel Davis's response was immediate. "Alpha 1, excellent work. QRF will establish security perimeter around your position while intelligence personnel process the materials you've recovered. Angel, your early identification of hostile positions may have prevented a significant enemy operation." Maria felt a deep sense of professional satisfaction as she maintained her surveillance of the surrounding terrain. Her warnings had been initially questioned, but her persistence and accurate shooting had not only protected her fellow soldiers but had also disrupted enemy plans that could have endangered multiple coalition units. The quick reaction force arrived in a thunder of helicopter rotors and diesel engines, quickly establishing a defensive perimeter around the area where the engagement had occurred. Specialized intelligence personnel immediately began processing the materials recovered from the insurgent positions, working to identify other elements of the planned enemy offensive. "Angel, this is base actual," Davis transmitted. QRF is establishing security for the intelligence exploitation. Maintain your current position until we complete operations in your area. Copy. Base actual. Angel maintaining Overwatch position. As intelligence personnel worked through the recovered materials, the scope of the insurgent plan became clear. Multiple coalition positions had been targeted for simultaneous attacks during the Christmas Eve period, when enemy planners assumed security would be reduced due to holiday activities. The three insurgents Maria had eliminated were part of a reconnaissance element, gathering final intelligence for these coordinated attacks. The radio traffic throughout the afternoon reflected the increased activity as coalition forces responded to the intelligence windfall. Additional patrols were dispatched to investigate suspected insurgent positions, security was increased at vulnerable installations, and plans were developed to disrupt the enemy offensive before it could begin. Through it all, Maria maintained her position on Hill 247, providing continuous overwatch as various units moved through the valley below. Her role had evolved from questioned observer to trusted tactical asset, with multiple units requesting her assessment of terrain and potential threats throughout the afternoon. As evening approached, the last of the intelligence materials were processed and prepared for transport back to the main base. The insurgent positions had yielded maps, communication schedules, weapons caches, and detailed plans that would keep intelligence analysts busy for weeks. Most importantly, the information would allow coalition forces to prevent the planned Christmas Eve attacks. Angel, this is base actual. Davis transmitted as the sun began to set over the mountainous terrain. Excellent work today. Your early identification of hostile activity and accurate engagement prevented potential disaster for multiple coalition units. Prepare for extraction with the QRF elements. Maria began the methodical process of packing her equipment and preparing to leave the position she had occupied for the entire day. As she worked, she reflected on how the day's events had unfolded, from early morning skepticism about her warnings to afternoon recognition of her crucial role in preventing enemy attacks. The extraction helicopter arrived as full darkness settled over the valley, its navigation lights barely visible as it landed near Maria's position on Hill 247. As she climbed aboard with her gear, she could see the scattered lights of various coalition units still working in the valley below, processing the intelligence that would reshape their understanding of enemy plans throughout the region. During the flight back to base, Maria looked out at the mountainous terrain that had nearly become the site of a successful insurgent ambush. Her early identification of hostile positions and accurate shooting had not only protected Alpha Team, but had also provided the intelligence necessary to prevent much larger attacks on coalition forces throughout the area. As the helicopter approached the landing zone at their forward operating base, Maria could see the increased activity that resulted from the day's intelligence recovery. Additional security patrols were departing for night missions, communication centers were buzzing with increased traffic, and command elements were clearly preparing for expanded operations based on the insurgent plans they had discovered. The day had begun with routine patrol assignments and skeptical responses to her tactical assessments. It was ending with recognition that her professional skills and persistent warnings had prevented what intelligence analysts were already calling a potentially devastating enemy offensive against coalition forces during the Christmas holiday period. The forward operating base was alive with activity when Maria's helicopter touched down just after 2,100 hours. Soldiers moved purposefully between buildings, carrying equipment and reports that reflected the intelligence windfall from the day's engagement. Bright lights illuminated the command center, where analysts worked through the night to process the insurgent materials that could prevent attacks across the entire region. Maria gathered her gear and walked toward the weapons maintenance area, following the same routine she had performed after every mission for the past 18 months. Her rifle needed to be cleaned and inspected after firing 3 rounds in combat, and her equipment needed to be inventoried and prepared for potential follow-up missions. Santos, Colonel Davis called out as she approached the armory building. Outstanding work today. I need to see you in my office when you're finished with your equipment maintenance. Yes, sir, Maria replied, wondering whether the meeting would address her morning warnings that had initially been questioned. The tone in Davis's voice was positive, But military commanders rarely called individual soldiers to their offices unless something significant needed to be discussed. Inside the armory, Maria methodically disassembled her rifle and began the cleaning process that was second nature after years of training and combat experience. The familiar ritual of cleaning each component gave her time to think about the day's events and their implications for her role within the unit. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez entered the armory while Maria was reassembling her rifle. His expression was serious, but she detected something that might have been respect in his manner as he approached her workstation. "Hell of a day out there, Santos," he said, settling into a chair across from her work area. 3 for 3 at long range. And you saved Alpha Team from a coordinated ambush. That's professional-level shooting. "Thank you, Sergeant," Maria replied, continuing her work on the rifle's bolt assembly. "Just doing my job." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, watching as she worked with practiced efficiency. "You know, some of us weren't sure what to make of you when you first arrived here. Female sniper wasn't something we'd seen before, and there were questions about whether you'd hold up under pressure." Maria looked up from her work, meeting Rodriguez's eyes directly. "And now I think anyone who questions your abilities is an idiot," Rodriguez said bluntly. "You identified threats that everyone else missed. You stuck to your assessment when command questioned you, and you eliminated those threats with textbook precision. That's exactly what we need from our snipers." The conversation was interrupted by Corporal Thompson entering the armory, followed by several other soldiers from Alpha Team. Their manner was different from the casual interactions Maria had become accustomed to. More respectful, more inclusive. "Angel," Thompson said, using her call sign with genuine respect for the first time. "Lieutenant Harrison asked us to tell you that Alpha Team owes you our lives. If you hadn't spotted those insurgents and taken them down, we'd have walked right into that kill zone." The other soldiers nodded in agreement, and Maria saw something in their faces that had been missing before: acceptance. Not just acknowledgement of her technical skills, but recognition that she was truly part of the team. "We all did our jobs today," Maria said simply. "You guys reacted professionally when contact was initiated, and everyone went home alive. That's what matters." "Maybe," said Private First Class Jackson, one of Alpha Team's younger soldiers. "But we're going home alive because you saw threats that nobody else spotted and had the skill to eliminate them before they could hurt us." After completing her equipment maintenance, Maria walked to the command center to meet with Colonel Davis. The building buzzed with activity as intelligence personnel continued processing the materials recovered from the insurgent positions. Computer screens displayed maps, photographs, and translated documents that revealed the scope of the planned enemy offensive. Davis's office was located on the second floor of the command building, and Maria could see the entire base through his windows as she knocked on his door. The increased security posture was evident everywhere: additional guard posts, roving patrols, and communication antennas that indicated expanded coordination with higher headquarters. "Come in, Santos," Davis called out. "Have a seat." The colonel's office was spartanly decorated, with maps covering most of the wall space, and a single photograph of his family on his desk. At 52, Davis had spent more than half his life in the military, and his weathered face reflected the stress of commanding soldiers in combat. "First things first," Davis began, settling behind his desk. "Your performance today was exceptional. You identified threats that our intelligence network missed, you maintained your assessment despite initial skepticism from command, and your shooting eliminated those threats before they could endanger our forces." "Thank you, sir," Maria replied. "But I want to talk about something more than just your shooting skills," Davis continued. "When you first reported possible hostile activity this morning, I questioned your assessment because intelligence reports indicated the area was clear. That was a mistake on my part." Maria remained silent, unsure how to respond to such a frank admission from her commanding officer. "The truth is," Davis continued, "I let institutional bias affect my judgment. I questioned your assessment not because of any deficiency in your reporting, but because some part of me was still adjusting to having a female sniper in the unit. That's unacceptable, and it nearly cost us casualties today." The colonel's honesty was unexpected, and Maria felt respect for his willingness to acknowledge his error publicly. "Sir, We all make assessment errors in combat situations. The important thing is that we responded correctly when the situation developed. That's generous of you, Santos. But it doesn't change the fact that I nearly ignored warnings that saved American lives. Davis leaned forward in his chair. I want you to know that your tactical assessments will receive full consideration in the future, and I'll be addressing this issue with the entire command staff. The conversation shifted to the intelligence recovered from the insurgent positions. The materials revealed a sophisticated enemy operation that had been planned for months, with detailed surveillance of coalition positions and coordinated timing designed to maximize casualties during the Christmas holiday period. The 3 insurgents you eliminated were part of a reconnaissance element gathering final intelligence for attacks on 7 different coalition positions, Davis explained, pointing to locations marked on the map behind his desk. Without the materials we recovered from their positions, those attacks might have succeeded. Maria studied the map, noting that their own forward operating base was among the planned targets. The insurgents had identified weaknesses in perimeter security and had planned a coordinated assault designed to penetrate the base's defenses during Christmas Eve celebrations. Intelligence estimates that your actions today prevented casualties that could have numbered in the dozens across all targeted positions, Davis continued. That's the kind of impact that individual soldiers rarely have the opportunity to achieve. As their meeting concluded, Davis informed Maria that she would be recommended for a commendation recognizing her actions during the day's engagement. More importantly to Maria, he indicated that her tactical assessments would carry increased weight in future mission planning. Walking back to her quarters, Maria encountered Lieutenant Harrison near the dining facility. Alpha Team's leader was engaged in animated conversation with several other officers, but he broke away when he saw her approaching. "Angel," Harrison called out. "I was just telling these guys about your shooting today. 3 targets at 800+ meters, all first-round hits, in a tactical situation where missing would have cost lives. That's sniper school instructor-level shooting." The other officers looked at Maria with obvious respect, and she realized that word of her performance was spreading throughout the base. For the first time since arriving at the forward operating base, she felt fully accepted by her fellow soldiers. "Just doing my job, Lieutenant," Maria replied. Alpha Team's reaction to contact was textbook. Everyone performed professionally. "Maybe so," Harrison said, "but your early warning and accurate shooting turned what could have been a disaster into a tactical victory. Alpha Team won't forget that." Christmas Eve morning arrived with increased security measures throughout the base as intelligence analysts continued processing the enemy plans recovered the previous day. Coalition forces across the region had been alerted to the planned attacks, and coordination centers worked around the clock to disrupt the insurgent offensive before it could begin. Maria was assigned to a new mission that reflected her enhanced status within the unit. Instead of routine patrol overwatch, she would be part of a specialized team tasked with investigating suspected insurgent positions identified through analysis of the recovered materials. The mission briefing took place in the main conference room, where intelligence officers presented detailed analysis of enemy plans and known insurgent locations. Maria's role would be to provide precision fire support for teams investigating these positions, with particular emphasis on eliminating any insurgents who might attempt to escape during coalition raids. "Based on yesterday's intelligence recovery," the briefing officer explained, "we've identified 12 suspected insurgent positions that were part of the planned offensive. Today's operations will investigate these positions and eliminate any threats they contain." The specialized team included soldiers from multiple units, each selected for specific skills that would be needed during the day's operations. Maria was the only sniper assigned to the team, reflecting both her demonstrated abilities and the trust command now placed in her tactical assessments. Team leader Captain Williams approached Maria after the briefing. Williams was a Special Forces officer with extensive combat experience, and his inclusion in the operation indicated its importance to overall mission success. "Santos, I've heard about your performance yesterday," Williams said. "Today we're going to be moving through terrain that could hide insurgent positions similar to what you identified yesterday. I need someone with your observation skills to spot threats before they can engage our assault teams." The mission would take them through mountainous terrain similar to the previous day's patrol area, but This time, they would be actively hunting insurgents rather than conducting routine reconnaissance. Intelligence suggested that enemy forces were attempting to reposition in response to the disruption of their original plans. The insurgents know we have their communications and position information, Williams explained as the team prepared for departure. They'll be moving to alternate locations and may attempt to accelerate their timeline for attacking coalition positions. Our job is to find them before they can reorganize. Maria checked her equipment one final time as the team assembled for departure. Her rifle had been thoroughly cleaned and tested after the previous day's engagement, and she carried additional ammunition in case the mission developed into sustained contact with enemy forces. The helicopter flight to their insertion point took them over terrain that Maria now recognized from intelligence maps. Below, she could see several of the positions that had been targeted for insurgent attacks, including the forward operating base where they were stationed and smaller outposts that would have been particularly vulnerable to coordinated assault. 30 seconds, called the helicopter crew chief as they approached the landing zone. Maria felt the familiar tension that preceded combat operations, but this time it was accompanied by confidence that came from proven performance under pressure. The insertion proceeded smoothly, with the team establishing security around the landing zone before beginning their movement toward the first suspected insurgent position. Maria took point as they advanced through terrain that offered excellent concealment for defending forces, but also provided multiple observation points for an experienced sniper. Through her scope, Maria systematically scanned the route ahead, looking for any signs of insurgent activity. The skills that had allowed her to identify the previous day's threats were even sharper now, enhanced by combat experience and the confidence that came from successful engagement. Alpha Element. This is Overwatch, Maria transmitted as she observed their approach to the first suspected position. Route appears clear from current position, but recommend caution approaching grid reference 41 SMB 12567 67823. Terrain favors defensive positions. Captain Williams acknowledged her assessment and modified the team's approach route to take advantage of cover while avoiding areas that would expose them to potential ambush. The coordination between Maria's tactical observations and Williams's tactical decisions demonstrated the professional respect that had developed for her abilities. The first suspected insurgent position was empty when the assault team reached it, but signs of recent occupation were evident. Fighting positions had been improved with additional cover, ammunition storage areas had been prepared, and communication equipment had been installed before being hastily removed. Overwatch. This is Alpha, Williams reported. Position shows evidence of recent occupation, but no current insurgent presence. Moving to secondary position. Maria maintained surveillance as the team moved between suspected positions, each one showing similar signs of hasty evacuation. The insurgents were clearly responding to the compromise of their plans by relocating to alternate positions, but they were leaving behind evidence of their preparation for the planned attacks. At the fourth position they investigated, Maria spotted movement in the distance that indicated possible insurgent activity. Through her scope, she could see figures moving between cover positions approximately 1,200 meters away, apparently engaged in some form of tactical movement. Alpha, this is Overwatch. Possible insurgent activity, grid reference 41 SMB 12789 68234. Multiple personnel observed moving tactically between covered positions. Recommend investigation. Williams immediately began maneuvering the assault team toward the area Maria had identified, using terrain features to conceal their approach while maintaining communication with both Maria and the aircraft providing overhead surveillance. As the team moved closer to the suspected insurgent position, Maria's observation became more detailed. Through her scope, she could clearly see armed individuals in military-style equipment preparing defensive positions similar to those used in the previous day's ambush. Alpha, this is Overwatch. Confirmed insurgent position with multiple armed individuals preparing defensive positions. Count approximately 6 personnel with weapons and military equipment. The tactical situation was developing exactly as it had the previous day, with Maria providing early warning of insurgent activity that allowed coalition forces to gain tactical advantage before enemy forces could complete their preparations. Williams positioned his assault team to surround the insurgent position while Maria provided overwatch from a concealed position that offered clear fields of fire over the entire area. The coordination demonstrated the trust that had developed in Maria's tactical assessments and her ability to provide precision fire support when needed. As Christmas Eve afternoon progressed, the operation successfully identified and eliminated multiple insurgent positions that had been prepared for attacks on coalition forces. Maria's role evolved throughout the day from observer to active participant in tactical operations, with her assessments and precision shooting contributing directly to mission success. The success of the operation effectively ended the insurgent offensive that had been planned for the Christmas holiday period. Instead of coordinated attacks on vulnerable coalition positions, enemy forces found themselves disrupted, scattered, and unable to execute their carefully planned operations. As evening approached and the team prepared for extraction, Maria reflected on how dramatically her role within the unit had changed in just 2 days. She had evolved from questioned outsider to trusted tactical asset, with her abilities fully recognized and integrated into combat operations. Christmas Eve evening brought an unusual atmosphere to the forward operating base as soldiers prepared for holiday celebrations while remaining on high alert for potential insurgent activity. The intelligence recovered from Maria's engagement had disrupted enemy plans, but threat levels remained elevated as scattered insurgent groups attempted to reorganize and salvage their operations. Maria sat in the communications center, monitoring radio traffic from ongoing operations throughout the region. Coalition forces were reporting successful raids on insurgent positions across 7 different sectors, with the intelligence materials she had helped capture providing targeting information that was proving invaluable to tactical commanders. "Angel, you've got visitors in the main briefing room," announced Staff Sergeant Rodriguez as he entered the communications center. His tone carried the respect that had become standard when addressing Maria since her performance during the previous day's engagement. Walking to the briefing room, Maria found an unexpected gathering of senior officers including Colonel Davis, Captain Williams, and several other commanders she recognized but had never personally met. The formal nature of the assembly suggested something significant was about to occur. "Santos, please have a seat," Davis said, gesturing toward a chair positioned in front of the assembled officers. "We wanted to talk with you about your performance over the past 2 days and its impact on operations throughout this region." The senior intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, stepped forward carrying a folder of documents and photographs. Maria recognized him as the analyst who had been processing the materials recovered from the insurgent positions. "Sergeant Santos, the intelligence you helped us capture has been extraordinary in both its scope and detail," Martinez began. "The insurgent plans we recovered indicate a level of coordination and preparation that we hadn't previously identified in this region." Martinez opened the folder and began displaying photographs of maps, communication schedules, and tactical plans that had been found with the insurgents Maria had eliminated. The materials showed months of preparation for coordinated attacks that would have targeted coalition forces across a wide area. These documents indicate that the insurgent network was much more sophisticated than our previous assessment suggested, Martinez continued. "They had detailed intelligence on our patrol schedules, base security procedures, and even personnel assignments. Without your intervention, their Christmas Eve attacks could have been devastating." Colonel Davis stepped forward to address the assembled officers and Maria. "The reason we're all here tonight is that Sergeant Santos's actions represent exactly the kind of individual initiative and professional excellence that makes the difference between mission success and disaster." The colonel paused, his weathered face reflecting the seriousness of his words. When intelligence reports indicated no hostile activity in her area of operations, Sergeant Santos trusted her own tactical assessment and maintained surveillance of suspected threats. When those threats became active, she engaged them with precision that prevented casualties among our forces. Captain Williams, who had led the specialized team during the day's operations, added his perspective on Maria's performance. "During today's mission, Sergeant Santos provided tactical assessment and precision fire support that was critical to our success. Her ability to identify and engage threats allowed us to eliminate insurgent positions before they could threaten coalition forces. The formal nature of the gathering became clear when Davis produced an official document bearing multiple signatures and seals. Sergeant Santos, it is my privilege to present you with the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service in combat operations against enemy forces. Maria felt a surge of emotion as she realized the significance of the moment. The Bronze Star was a decoration she had dreamed of earning throughout her military career, but she had never imagined receiving it under circumstances that had begun with questions about her tactical assessments. The citation reads, Davis continued, for exceptionally meritorious service during combat operations against insurgent forces on December 23 and 24, 2023. Sergeant Santos demonstrated outstanding tactical awareness by identifying concealed enemy positions that intelligence reports had failed to detect. Her accurate assessment of enemy intentions and precise engagement of hostile forces prevented potential casualties among coalition personnel and disrupted a coordinated enemy offensive. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army. The assembled officers applauded as Davis pinned the Bronze Star to Maria's uniform. The moment represented not just recognition of her individual performance, but acknowledgement that her tactical abilities and professional judgment were valued at the highest levels of command. After the formal ceremony, the officers dispersed to their various duties, but several remained to speak personally with Maria about her performance and its impact on regional operations. The conversations reflected genuine professional respect rather than the polite acknowledgement she had grown accustomed to receiving. Santos, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, said as they walked toward the dining facility, I wanted you to know that the intelligence you helped us capture has been shared with coalition forces throughout Afghanistan. The insurgent network you disrupted was apparently planning similar coordinated attacks in other regions. The scope of her actions' impact was becoming clearer as intelligence analysis continued. What had begun as routine patrol overwatch had evolved into a significant intelligence coup that was influencing operations across multiple provinces. In the dining facility, Maria found herself surrounded by soldiers from various units who wanted to express their appreciation for her actions. Word of her performance had spread throughout the base, and her status had clearly shifted from outsider to respected team member. Angel called out Corporal Thompson, who had been among the first to question her abilities when she arrived at the base. I owe you an apology for some of the things I said when you first got here. You've proven yourself in ways that matter. Thompson's honesty was echoed by other soldiers who approached Maria throughout the evening. The conversations were frank acknowledgments that initial skepticism about her abilities had been unfounded, and that her performance had earned their complete respect. Lieutenant Harrison joined the group gathered around Maria's table, carrying a bottle that he placed ceremonially in the center. This is a tradition in Alpha Team, he explained. When someone saves the team's lives, we break out the good stuff and make sure they know how much we appreciate it. The informal celebration continued as soldiers shared stories about combat experiences and discussed the tactical lessons learned from the previous day's engagement. For the first time since arriving at the base, Maria felt fully integrated into the social networks that bound the unit together. As midnight approached on Christmas Eve, the base settled into a routine that balanced holiday observances with the security requirements of an active combat zone. Guard rotations continued, communication centers remained fully staffed, and quick reaction forces maintained readiness for immediate deployment. Maria was assigned to overnight watch in the communications center, monitoring radio traffic from ongoing operations, and maintaining contact with patrols still operating throughout the region. The duty was routine, but important, ensuring continuous communication with all coalition forces operating in areas where insurgent activity remained possible. During the quiet hours of Christmas morning, Maria reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in just 3 days. She had arrived at the forward operating base 18 months earlier as an outsider whose abilities were questioned by many of her fellow soldiers. Now she was a Bronze Star recipient whose tactical assessments were trusted by senior commanders. The radio crackled with incoming traffic from a patrol operating in the northern sector of their area of operations. Base, this is Recon 3. We're investigating suspicious activity at grid reference 41 SMB 13456-69123. Requesting guidance on rules of engagement for potential hostile contact. Maria plotted the coordinates on her map and immediately recognized the location as one of the alternate positions identified in the insurgent materials. The patrol was investigating an area that intelligence suggested might be used by enemy forces attempting to reorganize after the disruption of their original plans. Recon 3, this is base, Maria responded. Be advised that grid reference is identified as possible alternate insurgent position based on recovered intelligence. Recommend extreme caution and request detailed reconnaissance before approach. The patrol leader acknowledged her warning and began systematic observation of the suspected position from a concealed location. Through radio communications, Maria could follow their tactical assessment of the area and provide guidance based on her analysis of the insurgent materials. Base, this is Recon 3. We're observing improved fighting positions and evidence of recent occupation at the suspected location. No current insurgent presence detected, but position appears to have been prepared for defensive operations. Maria cross-referenced the patrol's observations with intelligence maps showing insurgent preparation activities throughout the region. The pattern suggested that enemy forces were indeed attempting to establish alternate positions after the compromise of their original plans. Recon 3, recommend marking the position for future reference and withdrawing to safe distance, Maria advised. Intelligence suggests insurgents may attempt to reoccupy these positions as they reorganize their operations. The tactical coordination continued throughout the early hours of Christmas morning as various patrols investigated suspected insurgent positions and reported their findings to the communications center. Maria's role evolved into that of tactical coordinator, integrating intelligence information with field observations to provide guidance for ongoing operations. As dawn approached, Major Stevens entered the communications center for the morning briefing. Stevens was the base's operations officer, responsible for coordinating tactical activities throughout their area of operations. Santos, how's the overnight traffic been? Stevens asked, settling into a chair across from Maria's workstation. Quiet overall, sir, Maria replied. Recon 3 investigated one of the alternate positions from the insurgent materials and found evidence of recent preparation, but no current enemy presence. Several other patrols reported negative contact throughout their areas of operation. Stevens reviewed the night's activities and nodded approvingly. Sounds like the insurgent disruption is holding. They're probably trying to figure out how much we know about their operations and whether it's worth attempting to reorganize. The conversation was interrupted by incoming radio traffic from a patrol that had been investigating insurgent activity near the Pakistani border. Base, this is Border 6. We've got movement in our sector that appears to be insurgents attempting to cross into Pakistan. Requesting guidance on pursuit authority. Maria immediately began coordinating with Stevens to develop appropriate response to the reported insurgent movement. The situation required careful handling because pursuit across international boundaries involved political considerations beyond tactical concerns. Border 6, this is base, Stevens transmitted. Maintain observation, but do not pursue across international boundaries. We're coordinating with higher headquarters for appropriate response. The incident represented exactly the kind of complex situation that required integration of tactical assessment with strategic considerations. Maria's role had evolved to include not just identification of threats, but also coordination of responses that considered broader implications of military operations. Throughout Christmas morning, similar situations developed as insurgent groups attempted to reorganize and potentially escape the region where their operations had been compromised. Each incident required tactical assessment, coordination with higher headquarters, and careful consideration of rules of engagement that governed coalition operations. Maria's responsibilities during these incidents reflected the trust that had developed in her tactical judgment and her ability to coordinate effectively with various elements of the military command structure. She had become an integral part of the base's operational capability rather than simply a specialized shooter assigned to support missions. As Christmas Day progressed, Intelligence reports confirmed that the insurgent network responsible for planning the holiday attacks had been effectively disrupted. Enemy forces were scattered, their communication networks had been compromised, and their carefully planned operations had been prevented from execution. The success of the operation was reflected in reports from coalition forces throughout the region, all of whom had been alerted to potential attacks through the intelligence materials Maria had helped capture. Instead of spending Christmas responding to coordinated insurgent attacks, coalition forces were able to maintain routine security operations while continuing their primary mission of supporting Afghan government forces. During the afternoon, Colonel Davis stopped by the communications center to check on ongoing operations and speak personally with Maria about her evolving role within the unit. "Santos, I've been thinking about your performance over the past few days and its implications for how we organize our operations," Davis said, settling into a chair near her workstation. "Your tactical assessments have been consistently accurate, and your ability to coordinate complex operations suggests capabilities beyond traditional sniper roles." The colonel's comments indicated that her role within the unit would continue to evolve based on her demonstrated abilities and the trust she had earned from senior leadership. "I'm recommending you for advanced tactical training when this deployment concludes," Davis continued. "Your combination of technical skills and tactical judgment suggests potential for increased responsibilities in future assignments." The recommendation represented recognition not just of her shooting abilities, but of her overall contribution to military operations. It suggested a career path that would allow her to continue developing and utilizing the full range of her professional capabilities. As Christmas evening approached, Maria reflected on the remarkable changes that had occurred in her professional situation. She had begun the previous week as a questioned outsider whose tactical assessments were subject to skepticism. She was ending it as a Bronze Star recipient whose professional judgment was trusted by senior commanders and whose recommendations influenced operations throughout the region. The transformation had required not just technical competence, but also the courage to maintain her professional assessment in the face of initial skepticism and the determination to prove her worth through performance under pressure. The lessons learned during these critical days would shape her approach to military service throughout the remainder of her career. 3 months after the Christmas Eve engagement, Maria Santos stood before a different kind of gathering in the main briefing room at Bagram Airfield. Regional commanders, intelligence officers, and special operations personnel had assembled to hear her present lessons learned from the operation that had disrupted the insurgent offensive and changed how coalition forces approached threat assessment in mountainous terrain. The PowerPoint presentation displayed on the main screen showed tactical maps, photographs from the engagement, and intelligence materials recovered from the insurgent positions. But the real focus of the briefing was on the decision-making process that had led Maria to maintain her threat assessment despite initial skepticism from higher command. The key lesson from this operation, Maria explained to the assembled officers, is that tactical indicators observed at ground level may provide more accurate threat assessment than intelligence reports generated through technical means. Human observation remains critical to identifying sophisticated enemy operations. General Morrison, the regional commander, leaned forward in his chair as Maria continued her presentation. Morrison had specifically requested this briefing after reading intelligence reports about the Christmas Eve operation and its impact on subsequent counterinsurgency operations throughout Afghanistan. "Sergeant Santos, help me understand the timeline," Morrison said. "You identified hostile positions approximately 2 hours before the insurgents were scheduled to initiate their ambush. What specific indicators led you to maintain your assessment when intelligence reports suggested the area was clear?" Maria advanced to the next slide, which showed photographs taken through her scope during the initial observation period. "Sir, the primary indicators were positioning and behavior that suggested hostile intent. The individuals were in concealed positions that provided excellent fields of fire over known patrol routes. They were equipped with military-style weapons, and they were clearly coordinating their activities." The general nodded thoughtfully. "And when your initial warnings were questioned, what factors influenced your decision to maintain surveillance rather than accepting the intelligence assessment?" "General, My training emphasized trusting direct observation over secondary sources when the two conflict, Maria replied. The visual evidence clearly indicated hostile activity, regardless of what intelligence reports suggested about enemy presence in the area. The discussion that followed explored the broader implications of Maria's experience for military operations throughout the region. Her success in identifying threats that technical intelligence had missed suggested that human observation capabilities remained crucial to effective counterinsurgency operations. Colonel Davis, who had been promoted and transferred to a regional planning position, added his perspective on the command decisions involved in the operation. The lesson for commanders is that we need to trust the tactical assessment of our soldiers in the field, particularly when they have proven expertise in their specialties. The briefing continued for 2 hours as officers discussed how Maria's experience could be integrated into standard operating procedures for patrol operations and threat assessment. The Christmas Eve engagement had become a case study in effective tactical decision-making that was being analyzed at military schools throughout the United States. After the formal briefing concluded, General Morrison approached Maria privately to discuss her future career plans. The general's interest reflected the attention her performance had received at senior levels of military leadership. "Santos, I understand you're being recommended for advanced training when your deployment concludes," Morrison said. "Your performance during this operation suggests potential for increased responsibilities. Have you considered applying for special operations training?" The suggestion was unexpected but reflected the recognition that Maria's abilities extended beyond traditional sniper roles. Her tactical assessment capabilities and performance under pressure had attracted attention from elements of the military that specialized in complex operations requiring individual initiative and technical expertise. "General, I hadn't considered special operations, but I'm interested in any opportunity to continue developing my professional capabilities," Maria replied. Morrison handed her a business card for a special operations recruiting office. "Think about it. Your combination of technical skills and tactical judgment would be valuable in specialized units that operate in complex environments." The conversation marked another turning point in Maria's military career. From questioned outsider to Bronze Star recipient to potential special operations candidate, her professional trajectory had been dramatically altered by the events of a single Christmas Eve engagement. That evening, Maria video called her family from the communications center at Bagram. Her parents, both teachers in a small Texas town, had followed news reports about her Bronze Star award, but didn't fully understand the military context that made her actions significant. "Mija, we're so proud of you," her mother said, her image slightly delayed through the satellite connection. "Your father has been telling everyone in town about how you saved those soldiers." Maria smiled at her mother's enthusiasm while reflecting on how different her family's perspective was from the military environment where her actions were analyzed in terms of tactical doctrine and strategic implications. "It wasn't just me, Mama," Maria replied. "Everyone did their jobs professionally. I just happened to be in the right place to spot the threats before they could hurt anyone." Her father leaned into the camera frame, his weathered face reflecting pride mixed with concern. "Are you staying safe over there? The news makes it sound very dangerous." "I'm staying safe, Papa," Maria assured him. "And I'll be home soon. My deployment ends in 3 months, and then I'll have leave before my next assignment." The conversation with her family provided perspective on how her military experience related to the civilian world she would eventually return to. Her parents saw her achievements in terms of personal pride and family honor, while her military colleagues analyzed them in terms of tactical doctrine and professional development. After completing the call with her family, Maria walked to the dining facility where she found several soldiers from her original forward operating base who had also been transferred to Bagram for advanced training assignments. The informal gathering felt like a reunion as they discussed their various experiences since the Christmas Eve engagement. "Angel," called out Lieutenant Harrison, who had been promoted to captain and assigned to a specialized training unit. "How does it feel being the poster child for tactical excellence throughout Regional Command East?" The joking reference reflected how Maria's story had spread throughout military circles in Afghanistan. Training officers used her experience as an example of proper tactical decision-making, and her engagement had become part of standard briefings for newly arrived units. "It feels like I'm just doing my job," Maria replied, settling into a chair with her meal tray. "Although I have to admit it's nice having people listen when I make tactical assessments." Sergeant Rodriguez, who had also been promoted and transferred, added his perspective on how the Christmas Eve operation had affected attitudes throughout their original unit. "The whole base changed after that engagement. Nobody questions female soldiers' capabilities anymore, and everyone takes tactical warnings seriously regardless of who makes them." The conversation continued as the group discussed their various new assignments and training opportunities. Maria's Bronze Star had opened doors for advanced training that might not otherwise have been available, but she remained focused on continuing to improve her professional capabilities rather than resting on her achievements. The next morning brought news that would provide closure to the Christmas Eve operation. Intelligence reports indicated that the insurgent network responsible for planning the holiday attacks had been completely dismantled through follow-up operations based on materials Maria had helped capture. Major Stevens, who had been her operations officer at the forward operating base, called with the update. "Santos, thought you'd want to know that we just captured the last cell leader from the Christmas network. The intelligence you helped us recover led to operations that eliminated the entire organization." The news confirmed that her actions had contributed to long-term security improvements throughout the region rather than simply preventing a single planned attack. The insurgent network that had threatened coalition forces across multiple provinces had been systematically dismantled through intelligence-driven operations. The Regional Intelligence Office estimates that your Christmas Eve engagement prevented approximately 40 potential casualties across 7 different coalition positions, Stevens continued. "That's the kind of individual impact that military careers are built on." As her deployment neared its conclusion, Maria received official notification of her next assignment. Instead of returning to routine duties at a stateside installation, she had been selected for the Advanced Sniper course at Fort Benning, followed by assignment to a specialized unit that conducted training operations throughout the United States. The assignment reflected recognition that her experience in Afghanistan had provided expertise that could benefit other soldiers preparing for similar deployments. Her Christmas Eve engagement had become a case study in effective tactical decision-making that would be taught to future generations of military snipers. Colonel Davis, now serving in a planning position at U.S. Central Command, called to congratulate Maria on her new assignment and discuss the broader implications of her experience for military doctrine. "Santos, your story has been incorporated into training curricula at multiple military schools," Davis explained. "The lesson about trusting tactical assessment by soldiers in the field is being emphasized throughout sniper training programs." The conversation reminded Maria that her experience had implications beyond her individual career. The Christmas Eve engagement had contributed to changes in how military commanders approached threat assessment and tactical decision-making in complex operational environments. During her final week in Afghanistan, Maria received an unexpected visitor at Bagram Airfield. Sergeant Major Williams, the senior enlisted advisor to Special Operations Command, had flown in specifically to meet with her about potential future assignments. "Santos, your performance in Afghanistan has attracted attention at levels of command that most soldiers never reach," Williams explained during their meeting. "Special operations units are always looking for individuals who demonstrate the kind of tactical judgment and technical competence you've shown." The sergeant major outlined opportunities within special operations that would allow Maria to continue developing her specialized capabilities while taking on increased responsibilities for training and mission planning. The assignments would be challenging, but would offer career advancement opportunities not available through conventional military channels. "Think about it during your leave," Williams advised. "Special operations needs people who can make the kind of decisions you made on Christmas Eve and who have proven they can perform under pressure." Maria's final day in Afghanistan began with a ceremony at the forward operating base where her Christmas Eve engagement had occurred. Colonel Morrison, the base commander who had replaced Davis, gathered the entire unit to present Maria with a unit citation recognizing her contribution to base security and regional operations. "Sergeant Santos represents the finest traditions of American military service," Morrison announced to the assembled soldiers. "Her technical competence, tactical judgment, and Courage under pressure prevented enemy attacks that could have caused significant casualties among coalition forces. The ceremony concluded with Maria addressing the soldiers who would continue operations in the area where she had served. Her remarks focused on the importance of trusting professional training and maintaining tactical awareness regardless of what intelligence reports might suggest about threats. Trust your training, trust your observations, and don't hesitate to report threats even when others might question your assessment, Maria told the assembled soldiers. Your job is to protect each other and accomplish the mission. Everything else is secondary to those responsibilities. The flight home took Maria through Kuwait and Germany before landing at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. After 18 months in Afghanistan, the green landscape of the American East Coast seemed impossibly lush and peaceful compared to the mountainous desert terrain where she had spent the previous year and a half. During her 30-day leave, Maria visited family in Texas and reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since the Christmas Eve engagement. She had begun that deployment as a questioned outsider whose capabilities were subject to skepticism. She was ending it as a Bronze Star recipient whose tactical expertise was recognized at senior levels of military command. The recognition had opened career opportunities that extended far beyond traditional military assignments. Special operations training, advanced education opportunities, and leadership positions were all now within reach based on her proven performance under pressure. But, perhaps most importantly, Maria had proven to herself that trusting her professional judgment and maintaining her tactical assessment despite initial skepticism had been the correct decision. The lesson would guide her approach to challenges throughout the remainder of her military career and beyond. When her leave concluded, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos reported to Fort Benning, Georgia, for the advanced sniper course that would prepare her for assignment to the Special Operations community. The Christmas Eve engagement that had begun with doubts about her tactical assessment had evolved into a foundation for continued professional development and service to her country. The course would be demanding, but Maria approached it with confidence gained through proven performance in combat. She had demonstrated that technical competence combined with tactical judgment could make the difference between mission success and disaster, and she was determined to continue developing those capabilities in service of her fellow soldiers. As she checked into her new assignment, Maria reflected on the lessons learned during that critical Christmas Eve morning when she had been forced to choose between accepting intelligence reports and trusting her own tactical assessment. The decision to maintain her professional judgment despite initial skepticism had saved lives, disrupted enemy operations, and launched a career trajectory that would allow her to continue serving her country at the highest levels of military excellence. The nickname Angel had followed her from Afghanistan, but now it carried respect and recognition rather than skepticism and doubt. She had earned her place among the finest soldiers in the United States military through performance under pressure and dedication to protecting her fellow service members regardless of personal cost.